But hey, say something about Freud's great way of saying what he got from other people. So he would say, remember the phrase, what was the phrase in the book? So-and-so anticipated my
Oh,
results.
yes. Well, that's part of the literature where he goes through. And James Sully, who was a British psychologist, had written a nice book called Illusion and had written a lot of interesting ideas in there. And so in the book I try and give examples. He's talking about the unconscious. He's talking about pictorial representation of the imagery. He's talking about almost all of the concepts that you're going to see later on in Freud. And St. Denis, who had done a whole lot, the French guy, had done a whole lot in terms of lucid dreaming. Unfortunately, the book was in French. Freud claimed he could never get a hold of it and see it, so it would have been interesting if Freud would have been able to see St. Denis talking about lucid dreams. What would that have done to his? Would that have stretched him, or how would Freud have tried to deal with that? Because Freud didn't want any exceptions to his rules. He wanted to, like as a neurologist, once you figured out how those neurons connect together, that was it. And so when he had to deal with the idea of anxiety dreams and trying to figure out how they could handle wish fulfillment, because wish fulfillment was the major goal for Freud. He felt that all dreams were wish fulfillment. So, you know, on the surface of it, since most dreams are kind of unpleasant, it doesn't seem like, you know, this is your day, what do you wish for, you know, big meal, good job, big home, not that kind of wish fulfillment. But that it was something going on there. So now he had a problem eventually with anxiety dreams. So now he got into a problem of trying to have to deal with exceptions. And so he did not like to have any exceptions. He wanted to have it all figured out. So it was a real struggle for him when this one so directly confronted what was going on that he couldn't really deal with, you know, anxiety dreams and so forth. And then if you had other kinds of dreams, you could have those dreams because you desired to prove Freud wrong. So if your dreams didn't conform, then really it was wish fulfillment because your wish was to prove him wrong, so you gratified your wish, you tried to prove him wrong, and so you just wound up proving him right. So it was one of those things you can't, it's a no-lose situation that way with the dreams. So on this one with Sully, this was way back in 1896, and Freud went through several revisions of his book, and it wasn't until the third revision of his book, and somebody else was doing the literature stuff for him. Freud didn't really like doing the literature. Usually when you write a paper, when you do a dissertation or thesis, the first thing you do is review the literature. Who's the other people who worked on this? So Smith did this, Jones did this, and you go through what the literature review is, and then you come in with how you fit in. Freud said he hated doing that because he didn't want to think that anybody else could have discovered the same things he had discovered. So he acknowledged he never did the literature review until the end. All the rest of the thing was done, and then he's like, okay, now I got to do it that way. I got to try and go back and see what these other people said. But he didn't have his heart in it because he didn't want to find anybody who was saying something similar to what he did. So he didn't later on do much of the literature review either. He had other people in the analytic movement working with him. So then when it comes up to Sully, Sully's contribution is he was right because he happily anticipated Freud. It isn't that Freud went back and confirmed what Sully had done way before him. Sully did it way back here. But now Sully was smart enough to have confirmed what Freud did 20 years later. So that was Sully's genius in anticipating Freud, but not Freud giving him credit that you really were the first guy on. You were just confirming I was right, so you're on track with it. So it makes for difficulty when you have such a fierce desire. And one of the other things that troubled Freud, because I told you they were back and forth on the idea of telepathy and paranormal dreams and so forth, is that for him you had to have the wish, and you had to have all this kind of distortion, you know, all displacement and everything, which I'm assuming John's going to be talking about briefly in terms of condensation, distortion, and so forth. But if you didn't have those, it was a telepathic dream, and you somehow just picked up on what this other thing was, And there wasn't any distortion, there wasn't any of the displacement, there wasn't any of the condensation. So you didn't have dream work being manifested. Then what do you do with that? So now he's saying, well, that isn't really a dream. Because a dream has to have so-and-so. So even though you were sound asleep, had your eyes closed, had the experience, you didn't really have it because it didn't have these other qualities that Freud wanted to have to be in the dream. So if you didn't have those, now it's not really a dream. So he was kind of fierce with trying to keep this protection. I don't want any exceptions to it. And even though he accepted that there could be something, depending upon which article you're reading about telepathy, then it gave him a great deal of difficulty there. So where we've gone is, I would say that over history, you don't see as much emphasis on psychoanalysis anymore. Don had brought in a Newsweek one that I would encourage you to look at during the break. You don't see much in the way of psychoanalysis. One difficulty is health insurance won't cover it because usually a minimum bill is $2,000 a month. You're supposed to see somebody 4 days a week or 5 days a week. Big fee. Do it every day throughout the whole month. So you do 5 days a week, 4 weeks a month, and that's the bill for the psychoanalysis. So the insurance companies are not too willing to underwrite, $100, $200 an hour for that many hours for psychoanalysis, and usually 5 years would be considered about what a usual analysis would be. So it's not the most efficient way in terms of other alternative ways of being able to work with it. So we don't see much on. There's just been a lot of skepticism about his approaches. The Jungian one, I would say, has had a big impact coming up somewhat through the churches. There's a great book written by Morton Kelsey on this, about God's forgotten language. And so there's different church groups that seem to be now supporting, trying to get people dealing with dreams in the local church group and so forth. It's had much more of an influence in terms of art, because like the surrealists coming through, and you're aware of, surrealism like Dali and other kinds of representations, and they sort of claimed Freud. They said, well, wow, you're our hero. We really want to claim you because you've been showing all the stuff with the unconscious. And Freud rejected them. No, I don't want that. No, get away from me. So even though they tried to put him in an elevated status, he still wanted to be separate by himself. So he did not want to be considered as, he wanted to be his own guy. He was Freud, period. And he didn't want to be Freud, the patron saint of surrealism. He didn't want to have any mixing up of it, because then it would take the glare a little way away from Freud. So as I say, I know, because Don's been using a dreaming mind for several years, we've been friends for a number of years, and he tells me that the consistent thing we always get from the class is that the class gets unhappy because I'm too unkind toward Freud. So I have to speak my piece, I have to speak what to me is true. So if you feel I've been way too difficult on him again, I give you my apologies in advance. If you read the literature, read through what I have in the chapter, and I think that's where it's at. So that they consistently have been not favorably viewed by the Evergreen students, because you all are wanting fairness, and I'm not being fair in regard to Freud, but so be it. Okay.
Not everybody. Some people are on your side.